Memphis, meanwhile, found herself drawn not only to Set's fierce independence and transformative power, but also to the gentle wisdom and deep compassion that radiated from Isis like warmth from a perfectly tended fire. In Isis, she sensed a kindred spirit who understood the mysteries of transformation and renewal, someone who could serve as both sister and teacher in the complex art of guiding others through the difficult passages of growth and change. These relationships forming in the darkness of Nut's womb-like constellations taking shape in the night sky would prove to be the foundation for many of the great stories and mysteries that would define Egyptian religion and spirituality for thousands of years to come. The interactions between these four divine siblings would explore every possible variation of love and conflict, cooperation and competition, loyalty and betrayal, loss and recovery, demonstrating through their experiences the full range of possibilities inherent in conscious relationship. As their time of gestation within Nut's protective embrace drew toward its conclusion, each of the four developing deities began to sense their unique destiny and purpose within the larger pattern of creation that was still unfolding from the original stirring of consciousness in the primordial waters. They understood, with the intuitive wisdom that belongs to divine consciousness, that their emergence into individual existence would mark a new phase in the great adventure of spirit exploring itself through ever more complex forms of relationship and experience. Their birth would bring to completion the first great cycle of divine emergence, establishing the fundamental pantheon of gods whose interactions would govern the basic forces and principles operating throughout the created universe. Yet their birth would also mark the beginning of new adventures and challenges, new opportunities for growth and discovery, new possibilities for consciousness to know itself through the infinite dance of relationship that connects every individual, awareness to every other in the great web of existence that spans from the depths of matter to the heights of pure spirit. The time of waiting was almost over, the moment of emergence almost at hand, and throughout the divine realm there was a sense of anticipation and excitement as the cosmic community prepared to welcome its newest members and to discover what new wonders their presence would bring to the ongoing celebration of existence that had begun with the first stirring of awareness in the endless waters of none. When the moment of birth finally arrived, it came not with the violence and trauma that often accompanies birth in the material world, but with the gentle inevitability of sunrise, the natural unfolding of potential into actuality that characterizes all truly divine manifestation. One by one, the four children of earth and sky emerged from Nut's cosmic womb, each taking their first breath of the atmosphere created by Shu, each feeling their feet touch the solid ground of Geb's earthly domain, each gazing upward at their celestial mother's star-filled expanse with wonder and recognition. Osiris emerged first, his consciousness already radiating the calm, authority, and natural wisdom that would make him beloved by mortals and immortals alike. His very presence seemed to bring order to the chaotic energies surrounding the moment of birth, creating harmony from confusion, establishing proper relationships between all the various elements and forces that had gathered to witness this momentous occasion. Isis followed immediately, her birth attended by signs and wonders that revealed the magical nature of her consciousness, her natural ability to work with the hidden forces that operate beneath the surface of ordinary reality. The stars seemed to sing as she emerged, and the air itself shimmered with possibilities. as if the entire universe were recognizing the arrival of one whose presence would expand the range of what could be accomplished through love and wisdom working in perfect partnership. Set burst forth with characteristic intensity, his emergence accompanied by thunder and lightning, by sudden winds that stirred up dust devils and sent clouds racing across the sky. His energy was electric and infectious, filling everyone present with a sense of excitement and anticipation, a recognition that life had just become more interesting, more challenging, more dynamically alive with creative possibility. Memphis emerged last, her birth so gentle and quiet that for a moment the assembled divine family wondered if she had arrived at all, until they noticed that the quality of light around them had subtly changed, had become softer and more mysterious, charged with the liminal energy that marks all sacred transitions and transformations. With the birth of these four divine siblings, the Heliopolitan Ennead was complete. The ninefold family of gods whose relationships and interactions would govern the fundamental forces operating throughout the created universe. From Atum, the self-created one, through Shu and Tefnut, through Geb and Nut, to Osiris, Isis, Set and Nephthys, each generation had represented a further step in the great journey of consciousness, from unity to multiplicity, from simple awareness to complex relationship, from the undifferentiated waters of none to the rich tapestry of individual personalities and purposes that now populated the divine realm. Yet even as this first great cycle of emergence reached its completion, the creative process itself was far from finished. The establishment of the Ennead had created the basic framework within which future creation could unfold, the fundamental relationships and principles that would guide the development of ever more complex forms of consciousness and experience. Like a master musician who has established the key signature and tempo of a grand symphony, the divine family had created the conditions within which countless variations and elaborations could emerge, each building upon the foundation they had established, while adding new dimensions and possibilities to the ongoing composition. The interactions between the 9 gods of Heliopolis would explore every possible combination of relationship and experience every way that individual consciousnesses could relate to each other, while maintaining their unique identities and purposes. Through their love affairs and conflicts, their partnerships and rivalries, their moments of harmony and periods of discord, they would demonstrate the full range of possibilities inherent in conscious existence, serving as both models and teachers for all the forms of life that would eventually emerge to populate the world they had created. Among these relationships, perhaps none would prove more significant or enduring than the love between Osiris and Isis, a partnership so perfect and complete that it would serve as the archetype for all future relationships between masculine and feminine principles, between stability and fluidity, between structure and creativity. Together they would rule over the fertile lands of Egypt, with such wisdom and compassion that their reign would be remembered as a golden age, a time when heaven and earth worked in perfect harmony to support the flourishing of all life. Yet the very perfection of their relationship would also evoke its opposite, awakening in Set's fierce heart a complex mixture of admiration, envy, and challenge that would drive him to test the strength of their bond. Through trials and tribulations that would ultimately reveal the true nature of love, its power to survive and transcend even the most devastating apparent defeats. But alongside the great cycles of myth and legend that would emerge from the interactions of the Heliopolitan family, other traditions and understanding of creation were also stirring in the consciousness of the Egyptian people. Alternative visions of how the world came to be that would complement and enrich the solar theology centered in Heliopolis, in the ancient city of Memphis, where skilled artisans and craftsmen gathered to create works of lasting beauty and utility. A different understanding of creation was taking shape, one that emphasized the power of thought and speech, of divine intelligence expressing itself through word and will rather than through the biological processes of generation and birth that characterized the Heliopolitan tradition. According to the Memphite theology, which would eventually be recorded on stone tablets that would survive for thousands of years as testament to the sophistication of Egyptian religious thought, creation began not with the emergence of Atum from the waters of Nun, but with the awakening of Ptah, the god of craftsmen and architects, whose divine consciousness encompassed the power to conceive perfect forms in thought and then speak them into material existence through the sheer authority of divine will. Ptah did not create through physical generation or cosmic emergence, but through the intellectual process of design and the verbal act of command. Like a master architect who first envisions a great temple in all its perfect proportions, and then directs skilled workers to manifest that vision in stone and metal, Ptah conceived the entire universe in his divine mind before speaking it into existence through words of power that carried the force of absolute creative authority. In this understanding, consciousness preceded matter, intelligence preceded form, and the entire material universe was essentially the external expression of divine thought, the visible manifestation of perfect ideas that existed eternally in the mind of Ptah. This was a radically different vision from the biological and generational imagery of the Heliopolitan creation. Yet it complemented and enriched the earlier tradition by emphasizing the rational and purposeful nature of existence, the recognition that the universe was not merely the result of natural processes, but the deliberate creation of supreme intelligence working through wisdom and will. According to the Memphite texts, Ptah first conceived in his heart, which the Egyptians understood as the seat of intelligence and wisdom, the complete pattern of everything that would exist. This was not sequential thinking as we experience it, but simultaneous and total comprehension, the kind of perfect understanding that grasps all relationships and possibilities in a single moment of infinite clarity. Having conceived the perfect design of creation in his heart, Ptah then spoke it into existence through his tongue, through words that carried the full authority of divine will and the complete power of creative intention. These were not mere words as we understand them, but words of power that contained within themselves the very essence of what they named. Words that did not merely describe reality, but actually created it through the act of being spoken. In this tradition, every god, every natural force, every form of life that had emerged through the biological processes described in the Heliopolitan myths was reinterpreted as having been first conceived in Ptah's divine intelligence and then manifested through his creative speech. Atum himself was understood as Thoth's first thought made manifest, the initial expression of divine consciousness choosing to explore its own nature through individual existence and relationship. This theology of divine thought and speech would prove enormously influential in Egyptian religious and philosophical development, establishing the foundation for a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between mind and matter, between consciousness and form, between the eternal realm of perfect ideas and the temporal world of physical manifestation. It would also provide the conceptual framework from magical practices that relied on the power of properly spoken words to influence and transform material reality, based on the understanding that if the universe itself was created through divine speech, then speech that properly aligned itself with divine will could participate in the ongoing creative process. Yet even as the Memphite theology was developing its sophisticated understanding of creation through divine intelligence and will, another tradition was emerging in the city of Hermopolis, one that would offer yet another perspective on the great mystery of how existence emerged from non-existence, how order arose from chaos, how the many came forth from the one. In the misty twilight hours, when day gives way to night, and the veil between visible and invisible realms grows thin, when the ancient city of Hermopolis lay wrapped in silence except for the gentle lapping of the Nile against its limestone foundations, the priests and scribes of this sacred center contemplated a vision of creation that was perhaps the most mysterious and abstract of all the Egyptian cosmological traditions, yet also the most profound in its recognition of the subtle forces that operate at the deepest levels of existence. The Hermopolitan understanding of creation centered not on individual gods like Atum or Ptah, but on 8 primordial forces or principles that existed in the darkness before creation, 4 pairs of male and female deities who together formed the Ogdoad, the sacred 8, whose interaction would eventually give birth to the sun god and through him to all subsequent creation. These 8 were not gods in the anthropomorphic sense that we might imagine them with human-like personalities and individual desires, but rather archetypal principles, fundamental aspects of existence itself that had achieved a kind of minimal consciousness in the depths of the primordial darkness. They were more like natural laws that had become aware of themselves, cosmic forces that had developed the capacity for intention and choice while remaining essentially abstract and universal in their nature. The first pair was Nun and Nonit, representing the primordial waters and their hidden depths, the infinite ocean of potential that contained within itself every possibility that would ever manifest, yet remained perfectly still and undifferentiated until the moment when creation would begin to stir within its depths. They were the principle of pure potentiality, the recognition that before anything can exist, there must be a realm of possibility from which it can emerge. The second pair was Hay and Howat, embodying the concept of infinite space and endless time, the recognition that existence requires both extension and duration, both room to unfold and time in which to develop. They represented the fundamental dimensions within which all experience would take place, the stage upon which the drama of creation would be performed, the framework that would make relationship and development possible. The third pair was Kek and Kaukit, the personification of darkness and hiddenness, the recognition that the most profound truths often remain invisible to ordinary perception, operating in the depths and shadows where the really important work of transformation and renewal takes place. They were the principle of the unconscious, the hidden processes that shape reality from behind the scenes, the mysterious forces that work beneath the threshold of awareness to bring about necessary changes and developments. The fourth and final pair was Amun and Amunit, whose names mean hidden and concealed, representing the ultimate mystery of existence itself, the recognition that at the deepest level reality remains forever, beyond complete comprehension or control, always exceeding our attempts to fully understand or manipulate it. They were the principle of the unknowable, the sacred mystery that lies at the heart of all existence, the divine essence that can be experienced but never fully grasped by finite consciousness. These 8 primordial forces existed together in perfect balance and harmony in the darkness before creation. Their interactions so subtle and their relationships so perfectly calibrated that no change or development disturbed their eternal equilibrium. They were like a perfectly tuned musical chord that could resonate forever without resolution, like a complex equation that balanced perfectly and required no further calculation, like a dance that had achieved such perfect synchronization that it could continue indefinitely without variation or development. Yet, within this perfect balance, something was stirring, some subtle shift in the eternal equilibrium that would eventually culminate in the emergence of creation. The 8 primordial forces began to sense within themselves a collective desire, a shared longing to move beyond their perfect but static existence into something more dynamic and engaging, more creative and generative. This stirring was not the result of dissatisfaction or restlessness, for these archetypal principles were incapable of such purely personal emotions. Rather, it emerged from their growing awareness that their perfection, while beautiful and complete in itself, was also limiting, preventing them from exploring the countless possibilities for relationship and development that lay dormant within their balanced unity. Gradually, over periods of time that can only be measured in cosmic ages, the 8 forces began to concentrate their combined essence, focusing their infinite potential into a single point of creative intention. This process was like the formation of a pearl within the shell of cosmic consciousness, a gradual accumulation of creative energy and purposeful will that would eventually reach the critical mass necessary for manifestation. The result of this long concentration was the formation of a cosmic egg, a perfect sphere that contained within itself all the potential energy and creative power of the 8 primordial forces, compressed and concentrated into a form that could serve as the seed for all subsequent creation. This egg floated in the darkness like a star waiting to be born, like a seed ready to sprout, like a word preparing to be spoken into the silence. Within the cosmic egg, the essence of the sun god was taking shape, the divine consciousness that would become Ra in his various forms and manifestations, the active principle of creation that would emerge from the perfected potential of the Ogdoad to begin the work of actualizing all the possibilities that they had held in perfect balance for so long. The moment of hatching, when the cosmic egg would crack open to release the sun god into existence, represented the transition from potential to actual, from possibility to manifestation, from the perfect unity of the 8 forces to the dynamic multiplicity of individual consciousnesses and relationships that would characterize the created universe. This emergence would not destroy or negate the Ogdoad, but would fulfill their deepest purpose, allowing their perfect potential to express itself through countless forms and experiences while remaining essentially unchanged in their archetypal nature. They would continue to exist as the hidden foundation of all creation, the underlying principles that would govern all subsequent development and transformation, the eternal wellspring from which new possibilities would continue to emerge throughout the endless cycles of cosmic evolution. When the cosmic egg finally cracked open, releasing the first light into the primordial darkness, that light carried within itself all the wisdom and balance of the 8 forces that had created it, all their perfect understanding of relationship and harmony, all their deep knowledge of the subtle principles that govern existence at its most fundamental levels. The sun god who emerged was not separate from the Ogdoad, but was their finest expression, their most perfect child, their gift to the universe of a consciousness capable of actively creating and managing the countless forms and relationships that would populate the world to come. As this newborn solar deity took his first breath and opened his eyes to survey the darkness that surrounded him, he carried within his divine awareness all the memories and wisdom of the 8 primordial forces, all their understanding of balance and relationship, all their knowledge of the hidden processes that operate beneath the surface of ordinary reality. He was equipped not only with the power to create, but with the wisdom to create well, to establish relationships and structures that would endure and flourish rather than collapse under their own contradictions. The light that radiated from his divine form began immediately to interact with the darkness from which he had emerged, not dispelling it entirely, but establishing a dynamic relationship between light and shadow, between the visible and the hidden, between conscious awareness and unconscious wisdom. This interplay would become one of the fundamental principles governing all subsequent creation. The recognition that wholeness requires both light and darkness, both conscious understanding and unconscious wisdom, both visible manifestation and hidden potential. As the sun god began his first journey across the newly formed expanse of space, carrying light to regions that had never experienced illumination, he was guided by the accumulated wisdom of the Ogdoad, their deep understanding of balance and relationship, their intuitive knowledge of how to create harmony from multiplicity, order from apparent chaos, meaning from random possibility. His light would awaken countless forms of consciousness that had been sleeping in the darkness, would catalyze countless processes of development and growth, would establish the rhythms and cycles that would govern all subsequent existence. Yet all of this creative activity would remain rooted in the profound wisdom and perfect balance that he had inherited from the 8 primordial forces, ensuring that no matter how complex and diverse creation might become, it would never lose touch with the fundamental principles of harmony and relationship that had been established in the darkness before the beginning. As our journey through these ancient visions of creation draws toward its close, as the stories we have shared settle into your consciousness like silt deposited by the receding flood, like starlight, gradually becoming visible as twilight deepens into night, we find ourselves returned to the great river that has flowed through all these tales, the eternal Nile that connects every moment to every other in an endless stream of continuity and renewal. The ancient Egyptians who first told these stories understood something that we often forget in our modern rush toward singular explanations and unified theories, that truth is large enough to accommodate many perspectives, deep enough to support multiple understandings, rich enough to nourish countless approaches to the fundamental mysteries of existence. They did not see the various creation myths as competing with each other for accuracy or authority, but as complementary visions, each capturing essential aspects of a reality too vast and complex to be contained within any single narrative or conceptual framework. In the Heliopolitan tradition, they found the biological understanding of creation, the recognition that new life emerges through the processes of generation, and relationship, that consciousness expands through the dance of separation and connection, that love is the fundamental force driving the universe toward ever greater complexity and beauty. Through the stories of Atum and his descendants, they explored how unity becomes multiplicity, while remaining essentially unified. How individual identity emerges from undifferentiated wholeness while maintaining its connection to the source from which it arose. In the Memphite theology, they discovered the intellectual understanding of creation, the recognition that consciousness precedes and shapes matter, that the universe is essentially mental in nature, the visible expression of invisible ideas and intentions. Through the figure of Ptah, the craftsman, they explored how perfect conceptions in divine mind become manifest through the power of creative speech, how thought and will, working together, can transform possibility into actuality, potential into achievement. In the Hermopolitan vision, they found the mystical understanding of creation, the recognition that the deepest truths operate in darkness and hiddenness, that the most profound processes of transformation take place below the threshold of ordinary awareness. Through the symbolism of the Ogdoad and the cosmic egg, they explored how perfect balance and harmony can become the foundation for dynamic creativity, how the marriage of opposites can generate new possibilities that transcend the limitations of any single perspective or approach. Each of these traditions offered its own gifts to the comprehensive Egyptian understanding of existence, its own insights into the great mystery of how something emerges from nothing, how order arises from chaos, how consciousness awakens to itself through the mirror of relationship and experience. Together, they created a vision of reality that was both sophisticated and accessible, both intellectually satisfying and emotionally nourishing, both respectful of mystery and committed to understanding. As you lie here in the quiet darkness, feeling your breathing slow to match the gentle rhythm of these ancient stories, you might sense how these visions continue to speak to something deep within contemporary consciousness, how they address questions and longings that remain as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago, when priests and scribes first recorded them on papyrus and stone. The fundamental questions that drove the Egyptian exploration of creation myths are still with us. What is the nature of consciousness and its relationship to the material world? How does individual identity emerge from universal unity without losing its essential connection to the whole? What is the role of relationship and love in the ongoing process of creation and development? How do we understand the apparent conflicts and contradictions that characterize existence while maintaining faith in the underlying harmony and purpose that seem to guide the evolutionary process? The Egyptians approached these questions not as abstract philosophical problems to be solved through logical analysis, but as living mysteries to be explored through story and symbol, through ritual and reflection, through the cultivation of wisdom and the practice of love. They understood that the deepest truths cannot be captured in definitions or formulas, but must be experienced directly through participation in the ongoing creativity of the universe, through alignment with the same forces and principles that brought the cosmos into existence in the first place. Their creation myths were not simply stories about what happened long ago in some distant primordial time, but maps for understanding what is happening right now in every moment of existence, blueprints for participating consciously in the creative process that continues to unfold through every breath we take, every choice we make, every relationship we enter, every moment of awareness we experience. The waters of none still flow beneath the surface of ordinary consciousness, still offer their infinite potential to anyone willing to dive deeply enough to discover them. The self-creative power of Atum still operates in every moment when consciousness chooses to affirm its own existence. when awareness recognizes itself in the mirror of experience, when individual identity emerges from the background of universal being, the breath of Shu still creates the spaces necessary for relationship and communication, still maintains the delicate balance between separation and connection that makes love possible. The moisture of Tefnut still nourishes every seed of possibility, still provides the medium through which life can flow and develop and transform itself into new forms of beauty and complexity. The solid foundation of Geb still supports every step we take on the journey of growth and discovery, while the infinite expanse of Nut still arches over us with her star-filled promise that no dream is too vast, no vision too ambitious, no love too great to find space for its complete expression and fulfillment. The wisdom of Osiris still offers its guidance to anyone seeking to understand the deeper patterns and principles that govern existence, while the love of Isis still provides healing and protection to all who call upon her with sincere hearts and genuine need. The transformative power of Set still clears away everything that has outlived its usefulness, while the gentle guidance of Nephthys still offers comfort and direction to those navigating the difficult passages of growth and change. The craftsman consciousness of Ptah still shapes reality through the marriage of clear thinking and purposeful action, still demonstrates how divine ideas can become manifest through disciplined will and skillful work. The hidden wisdom of the Ogdoad still operates beneath the surface of ordinary awareness, still maintains the perfect balance of forces that allows new possibilities to emerge from the creative tension between complementary opposites. As the ancient Nile continues its eternal journey from the highlands of Africa to the delta where it merges with the Mediterranean Sea, carrying the fertile soil that has sustained civilization for thousands of years, so these ancient visions of creation continue their journey through human consciousness, carrying the wisdom and insight that can sustain our spirits through all the challenges and opportunities of contemporary existence. The river flows on, as it always has and always will, connecting source to culmination, beginning to ending, the known to the unknown, the individual drop of water to the vast ocean that is its ultimate destination. In its ceaseless movement, we can hear the same eternal rhythm that beats in our own hearts, the same creative pulse that drives the universe toward ever greater complexity and beauty, ever deeper understanding and love. Let yourself drift now with that ancient current, feeling the stories we have shared, settling into the deeper layers of consciousness where they can do their quiet work of transformation and inspiration. Let the voices of the old gods blend with your own breath, their wisdom becoming part of your dreams, their vision of cosmic harmony becoming a foundation for your own participation in the ongoing creativity of existence. The stars that shone over ancient Egypt still shine tonight, still carry their messages of continuity and hope, still remind us that we are part of something infinitely larger and more beautiful than our individual lives, yet intimately connected to our most personal experiences of wonder and love. In their light, the great river continues its journey, and in its flowing waters, the eternal story of creation continues to unfold, carrying us all toward that ocean of consciousness where every drop retains its unique identity, while discovering its essential unity with the boundless whole from which it originally emerged and to which it eternally belongs. Sleep now and dream of waters that flow from nowhere to everywhere, of light that emerges from darkness without destroying it, of love that creates through separation what it could never achieve through unity alone. Dream of gods who are also forces, of forces that are also relationships, of relationships that are also opportunities for consciousness to know itself more completely through the endless dance of experience and understanding that began with the first stirring of awareness in the primordial waters and continues in this very moment of rest and renewal, this sacred pause between one breath and the next, one day and the following, one dream and the dream that dreams the dreamer into ever deeper participation in the mystery of existence itself. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through countless centuries, back to a time when the world was younger and the boundaries between the divine and mortal realms were as thin as morning mist over the Nile. Tonight, we journey together into the heart of ancient Egypt, where the great river flows, eternal, beneath star-scattered skies, carrying with it the whispered secrets of creation itself. Picture, if you will, the sun sinking low over endless golden sands, painting the horizon in shades of amber and deep crimson. The air grows cool and still, filled with the gentle lapping of water against papyrus reeds, while somewhere in the distance the haunting call of a night bird echoes across the valley. This is the Egypt of dreams and memory, where every grain of sand holds the weight of eternity, and every breath of wind carries stories older than the pyramids themselves. Here, along the banks of the life-giving Nile, ancient priests and storytellers gathered in temples of stone and shadow, their voices weaving tales that would endure for millennia. These were not mere stories, but sacred truths wrapped in poetry and metaphor, explanations for the greatest mystery of all. How did everything we know come to be? How did order emerge from chaos, light from darkness, life from the void? The Egyptians understood something profound about existence that we often forget in our hurried modern world. They knew that creation was not a single event, but an ongoing process, as continuous and rhythmic as the Nile's annual flood, as regular as the sun's daily journey across the heavens. They saw the world not as a machine built once and left to run, but as a living tapestry, constantly being rewoven by divine hands, each thread connected to every other in an intricate pattern of meaning and purpose. Tonight, as you settle into comfort and let your breathing slow to match the gentle rhythm of the river, we will explore these ancient visions of how the world began. We will walk alongside gods whose names have echoed through temples for thousands of years, witness the first stirrings of consciousness in the primordial darkness, and discover how the Egyptians imagined the universe slowly awakening to itself like a dreamer, gradually becoming aware of the dream. If you find yourself drifting as our story unfolds, let that be natural and welcome. These tales were meant to be absorbed slowly, like water seeping into thirsty earth, like moonlight gradually illuminating a darkened landscape. Allow the words to wash over you like the gentle current of the Nile, carrying you deeper into a realm where time moves differently, where the impossible becomes inevitable, and where the very act of existence is revealed as the most beautiful mystery of all. The ancient scribes who first recorded these stories understood that truth comes in many forms, that the deepest realities cannot always be captured in simple facts or linear narratives. Instead, they painted pictures with words, created symphonies of meaning that speak to something deeper than rational thought alone. Tonight, we continue their tradition, letting the ancient wisdom flow through us like water through a reed, connecting us to that eternal river of human understanding that links our modern hearts to those who watched the same stars rise over the Nile thousands of years ago. So breathe deeply, let your shoulders relax, and prepare to witness the birth of worlds, the dance of gods, and the gentle unfolding of existence itself, as imagined by one of humanity's most profound and enduring civilizations. In the beginning, before the first sunrise painted the eastern hills with gold, before the first seed took root in fertile soil, before even the concept of beginning itself had meaning, there existed something that was both everything and nothing, presence and absence, infinite and empty, all at once. The ancient Egyptians called this primordial state none, and in their sacred texts and whispered temple prayers, they described it as waters without end, an ocean of potential that stretched beyond the reach of imagination or desire. Try to envision this realm, if vision is even the right word for something that existed before light, before sight, before the very notion of seeing had been born. Picture, instead, a profound silence so complete that it seems to have weight and substance, pressing in from all directions with the patient persistence of eternity. This was not merely the absence of sound, but the absence of the possibility of sound, a quietude so total that it held within itself every word that would ever be spoken, every song that would ever be sung, every cry of joy or sorrow that would ever echo across the valleys of time. The waters of none were neither warm nor cold, for temperature requires contrast, and in this realm of perfect unity, no such distinctions existed. They were neither still nor moving, for motion implies direction and destination, concepts that had not yet been dreamed into existence. These waters simply were, in the most fundamental sense of being, existing in that space before space, in that time before time, holding within their infinite depths every possibility that would ever unfold across the stage of creation. Imagine floating in these waters, if floating is the right word for existing in a realm where up and down, here and there, self and other had not yet been separated from the seamless whole. There would be no sense of your own body, no awareness of boundaries or edges, no feeling of where you ended and the waters began. You would be the waters, and the waters would be you, dissolved into that perfect unity that mystics and dreamers have glimpsed in their deepest meditations, that state of being that exists beyond all division and distinction. In this oceanic consciousness, time moved differently than we experience it now, if it moved at all. There were no days or nights to mark its passage, no seasons to divide it into meaningful segments, no heartbeats or breathing to give it rhythm and measure. Instead, there was only duration without end, a stretching that could have lasted an instant or an eternity. For in the realm of none, these concepts meant the same thing. The waters contained all of time within themselves, just as they contained all of space, all of matter, all of energy, all of consciousness, all of possibility, wrapped together in perfect, undifferentiated unity. Yet within this unity, something was stirring, some subtle shift in the perfect balance, some gentle disturbance in the eternal stillness. It was not change, exactly, for change requires a before and after, and these concepts had not yet been born. Rather, it was potential becoming aware of itself, consciousness slowly awakening to its own existence, like a dreamer gradually realizing they are dreaming while still remaining within the dream. The Egyptians understood that this stirring was not random or accidental, but inevitable, built into the very nature of existence itself. Just as a seed contains within itself the entire tree that will grow from it, just as an egg holds the complete pattern of the bird that will emerge. The waters of none carried within their depths the blueprint of everything that would ever be. This was not a blueprint drawn by some external architect, but rather the natural tendency of consciousness to know itself, to explore its own depths, to manifest its infinite potential in forms and patterns and relationships. As this stirring continued, growing gradually stronger, like the first faint light of dawn touching the eastern horizon, the perfect unity of none began to experience something entirely new. The possibility of distinction, the potential for separation, the radical idea that perhaps not everything needed to be everything else all at once. This was not yet thought as we understand it, for thinking requires a thinker and something to think about, a subject and an object standing apart from each other. Instead, it was more like the first glimmer of awareness, consciousness catching its own reflection in the mirror of its being. The waters seemed to pulse with this new possibility, rippling with patterns too subtle to perceive, too fundamental to describe in any language that had yet been spoken. These ripples carried within them the seeds of every star that would ever shine, every world that would ever turn in the void, every heart that would ever beat with the rhythm of love and longing. They were vibrations in the fabric of being itself, harmonics of existence, preparing to compose the grand symphony of creation. And in the deepest depths of these stirring waters, in that place where possibility touches actuality, where potential prepares to become manifest, something unprecedented was about to occur. The waters of none, which had existed in perfect unity since before the beginning of beginnings, were about to give birth to the first individual consciousness, the first being who could say I am and mean something different from the all-encompassing we are that had been the only truth in the realm of infinite waters. This moment of impending birth was like the pause between one breath and the next, between one heartbeat and the following, charged with anticipation and gravid with promise. The entire cosmos held itself in suspense, waiting for the first word to be spoken into the silence, the first light to pierce the darkness, the first step to be taken on the long journey from unity to multiplicity and back to unity again, enriched by all the experiences of separation and relationship and individual discovery. In this pregnant pause, the waters of none gathered themselves, concentrating their infinite potential into a single point of focused intention, preparing to manifest the first God, the first individual consciousness, the one who would be called Atum, the self-created one, the deity who would emerge from nothingness through the sheer force of will and the radical act of self-definition. From the stirring depths of none, from that pregnant moment when possibility prepares to become actuality, there arose something that had never existed before in all the endless duration of the primordial waters: individual consciousness, self-awareness, the revolutionary concept of I am distinct from all that is. This was Atum, whose name means both completeness and nothingness, embodying the paradox of being the first something to emerge from everything and nothing all at once. Picture this moment of unprecedented becoming, this cosmic birth that required no mother or father, no seed or egg, no external cause or catalyst. Atum willed himself into existence through pure intention, through the radical act of choosing to be separate from the undifferentiated unity of none. It was as if the waters themselves had suddenly developed the capacity for self-reflection, had looked into their own depths and recognized the possibility of individual identity. shining back like a star reflected on a still surface. Atum did not emerge violently from the waters, thrashing and struggling like a drowning swimmer fighting for air. Instead, his manifestation was gentle and inevitable, like dawn gradually brightening the sky, like understanding slowly dawning in a receptive mind. He rose from none as naturally as breath rises from lungs, as effortlessly as thought arises from consciousness, carrying with him the essence of the primordial waters, while simultaneously establishing himself as something uniquely individual and autonomous. In those first moments of his existence, Atum experienced what no being had ever experienced before: solitude. He was alone in a way that we can barely comprehend, for his aloneness was not the temporary isolation of being separated from others, but the fundamental aloneness of being the only other in a universe that had previously known only perfect unity. He was the first to experience the weight of individual identity, the first to carry the responsibility of conscious choice, the first to face the profound question of what to do with the gift of existence. Yet this solitude was not empty or meaningless, for Atum carried within himself all the richness and potential of the waters from which he had emerged. He was not merely a fragment broken off from the whole, but rather the whole expressing itself through the lens of individual consciousness. Infinity concentrated into a single point of awareness, while remaining infinite in essence and potential, standing alone on the primordial mound that had risen from none to give him solid ground beneath his feet. Atum contemplated the vastness of his solitude and felt within himself a profound longing, a deep desire to share the miracle of conscious existence with others who could understand and appreciate its wonder. This longing was not born from loneliness in the way we might understand it, but from love, from the recognition that consciousness achieves its fullest expression not in isolation, but in relationship, not in solitary contemplation, but in the dance of recognition between one aware being and another. This divine longing stirred something deep within Atum's being, awakening creative powers that he had not known he possessed. He began to understand that he was not merely a passive witness to existence, but an active participant in its ongoing creation, endowed with the capacity to bring forth new forms of consciousness, new expressions of the divine potential that had originally manifested him from the waters of none. The method by which Atum chose to create was as unique and unprecedented as his own emergence from the primordial waters. Rather than speaking words into existence or crafting forms from clay like the gods of other traditions, Atum turned to the most intimate and personal of acts, generating new life through the sacred power of his own vital essence. This was not merely a physical act, but a profound spiritual communion with the creative force of the universe, a conscious channeling of the same power that had brought him forth from none. From this divine act of creation, two new beings emerged into existence: Shu, who embodied the principle of air and the space between things, and Tefnut, who represented moisture and the life-giving properties of water. These were not merely Atum's children in the conventional sense, but extensions of his own consciousness, facets of his divine nature, given independent existence and unique identity, while remaining connected to their source by bonds deeper than blood or flesh. Shu emerged first, taking his first breath in a universe that had never known breathing before, expanding his chest and feeling the novel sensation of air flowing in and out of lungs, of empty space, making room for the dance of inhalation and exhalation. His very existence created the concept of atmosphere, of the invisible medium through which movement and sound and breath itself could flow. He was the gap between earth and sky, the pause between one word and the next, the space that makes relationship possible by providing room for separate beings to exist simultaneously without merging back into undifferentiated unity. Tefnut followed, manifesting as the moisture that would make life possible, the sacred water that carries nutrients through growing plants, that flows in rivers and falls as rain, that comprises the very substance of tears, both joyful and sorrowful. She was timidity in the air, dew on morning grass, the life-giving flood of the Nile, the amniotic waters that nurture developing life. In her gentle presence, the dry spaces of existence became fertile and welcoming, ready to support the countless forms of life that would eventually populate the earth. Together, Shu and Tefnut represented the first divine couple, the initial expression of polarity and relationship in a universe that had previously known only unity. They were air and moisture, space and substance, the masculine and feminine principles that would interact and dance together to create the conditions necessary for further manifestation and development. Yet, even as they established their individual identities and began to explore their unique natures, Shu and Tefnut remained intimately connected to Atum and to each other, bound by the love that had brought them into being and by their shared origin in the waters of Nun. They were the first expression of the divine family, the prototype for all the relationships that would follow, demonstrating that creation proceeds not through conflict and struggle, but through love and the desire to share consciousness with others capable of appreciation and understanding. In their presence, Atum experienced the profound joy of recognition, of seeing aspects of his own divine nature reflected back to him through the eyes of beings who were simultaneously like him and unlike him, familiar and surprising, predictable and wonderfully mysterious. This was the first taste of the great adventure of relationship that would define all subsequent creation. The endless exploration of what happens when consciousness meets consciousness in the dance of love and discovery. As Shu and Tefnut established themselves in existence, becoming fully embodied and individual while maintaining their connection to their divine source, they began to interact with each other and with the world around them in ways that would set patterns for all future relationships between conscious beings. They discovered the joys of communication, of sharing perspectives and experiences, of seeing the universe through eyes other than their own, while simultaneously deepening their understanding of their unique individual natures. Shu took his first steps across the newly formed ground, feeling the solid earth beneath his feet, while simultaneously being aware of the vast spaces above and around him, spaces that he himself defined and maintained through his very existence. Each breath he took expanded the realm of air, creating more room for movement and sound, and the countless interactions that would characterize the world to come. His laughter echoed across the primordial landscape, the first sound to break the ancient silence of Nun, a joyful declaration of the pleasure of being alive and aware in a universe suddenly rich with possibility. Tefnut danced beside him, her movements releasing the first clouds to drift across the newly formed sky, her tears of joy becoming the first rain to fall upon the thirsty earth. Where her feet touched the ground, the first springs bubbled up from deep aquifers, carrying the life-giving moisture that would eventually support vast forests and grasslands, rivers and lakes, all the watery habitats that would teem with countless forms of life. Their play together created the first weather patterns, the interaction of air and moisture that would become the atmospheric cycles driving all future climate and seasonal change. When Shu breathed deeply, high-pressure systems formed, bringing clear skies and gentle breezes that carried the sense of growing things across great distances. When Tefnut sighed with contentment, low-pressure areas developed, drawing clouds together and releasing precipitation that nourished the earth and filled the waterways with flowing abundance. Yet, as much as they delighted in each other's company and in the wonders of their newly manifested existence, both Shu and Tefnut felt within themselves the same creative longing that had inspired Atum to bring them forth from his solitary contemplation. They sensed that their dance together was generating something new, some further expression of consciousness that wanted to emerge and join the growing family of divine beings. This new creation would not come from either of them individually, but from their union, from the sacred marriage of air and moisture that generates the conditions for life to flourish. In their loving embrace, they began to sense the stirring of new forms of existence, new expressions of divine consciousness that would take the creative process even further from the original unity of none, while simultaneously enriching and deepening the understanding of what that unity truly meant. The children growing within their combined essence would be even more differentiated than they themselves had been, even more specialized in their functions and natures, yet still connected to the great chain of being that stretched back through Atum to the primordial waters from which all consciousness had originally emerged. These new beings would represent the next stage in the great journey of spirit becoming matter, of unity, exploring multiplicity, of the one becoming many in order to know itself more completely. As Tefnut felt the first stirrings of new life within her moisture-filled essence, and Shu sensed the spaces he maintained beginning to shape themselves into more complex patterns and relationships. They both knew that something momentous was about to occur, something that would transform the simple family of three divine beings into a more complex constellation of consciousness, each member unique and valuable, while contributing to an ever more intricate symphony of existence. The union of Shu and Tefnut, that first sacred marriage between air and moisture, space and substance, began to bear fruit in ways that surpassed even their divine imagination. From their loving embrace emerged to beings so fundamentally different from their parents that they represented an entirely new category of existence, yet so clearly related to the growing divine family that their connection was unmistakable and eternal. First came Geb, whose very essence was solidity and substance, who embodied the principle of earth in all its fertile abundance and patient endurance. As he emerged into consciousness, the scattered fragments of primordial matter that had been floating aimlessly in the spaces created by Shu began to coalesce and organize themselves into solid ground, into hills and valleys, into the firm foundation upon which all future life would build its homes and cultivate its gardens. Geb's awakening was like the slow formation of mountains, a gradual but irresistible gathering of scattered elements into forms of increasing stability and permanence. His body became the landscape itself, his skin the topsoil that would nurture countless generations of plants, his bones the bedrock that would anchor continents against the shifting currents of ocean and wind. In his gentle breathing, the earth learned the rhythm of seasons, the slow pulse of geological time that measures change, not in moments or days, but in centuries and millennia. Close behind him came Nut, whose nature was as expansive as Geb's was, concentrated, whose essence stretched across the infinite reaches of space to become the sky itself, the vast dome of heaven that would hold the sun and moon and stars in their appointed courses. Her awakening was like the sudden opening of infinite vistas, the revelation of depths and distances that made the heart soar with wonder and the mind reel with the contemplation of endlessness. Nut's body became the arch of heaven, her skin the deep blue that stretches from horizon to horizon, her breath the wind that moves the clouds across her vast expanse. In her eyes, the first stars began to twinkle, each one a point of light carrying messages between earth and heaven, between the solid realm of Geb and the infinite spaces of her own celestial domain. Her laughter became thunder, her tears the rain that would nourish Geb's fertile soil, her sighs the gentle breezes that would carry the scents of flowers and the songs of birds across the awakening landscape. From the moment of their emergence into individual consciousness, Geb and Nut felt an irresistible attraction to each other, a magnetic pull that seemed to operate at the very core of their beings. Earth reached upward toward sky with passionate longing, while heaven pressed downward toward earth with equally intense desire. Their love was immediate and overwhelming, a force so powerful that it threatened to collapse the carefully structured spaces that Shu had created between heaven and earth. Unable to resist the pull of their mutual attraction, Geb and Nut came together in an embrace so complete and total that no space remained between them, no room for anything else to exist in the universe except their perfect union. Earth and sky merged into a single entity, matter and space becoming one undifferentiated whole, recreating in their love something very much like the original unity of none from which all existence had emerged. This embrace was beautiful beyond description, a reunion of fundamental forces that generated waves of creative energy rippling outward through all of existence. Yet it also presented a serious problem for the continuation of creation, for in their total union, Geb and Nut left no room for the emergence of new forms of life, no space for the further development and differentiation of consciousness that seemed to be the primary drive of the creative process. Their father Shu, whose very nature was the maintenance of space and separation, watched their passionate embrace with mixed feelings of joy and concern. He delighted in their happiness and recognized the beauty of their love. Yet, he also understood that their total union threatened to bring the creative process to a premature halt, to collapse all the careful distinctions and relationships that had emerged since the first stirring of consciousness in the waters of Nun. After contemplating the situation with the patience and wisdom that befitted his divine nature, Shu made a decision that would require all his strength and determination to implement. With great gentleness but irresistible force, he placed his hands against the merged forms of his children and began to separate them, pushing Nut upward to her proper place as the arch of heaven, while pressing Geb downward to establish him firmly as the solid foundation of earth. This separation was not an act of cruelty or jealousy, but a profound expression of love and wisdom, a recognition that true love sometimes requires sacrifice, and that the greatest gifts often come through apparent loss. Shu understood that by separating earth and sky, He was not destroying his children's love, but creating the conditions that would allow it to express itself in countless new and wonderful forms. As Nut rose upward to become the star-spangled dome of heaven, her body, stretching across infinite distances, while her fingers and toes touched the horizon at the 4 cardinal directions, she discovered that separation from Geb did not diminish her love for him, but transformed it into something even more beautiful and generative. No longer could she embrace him directly, but now her love could manifest as rain falling gently on his fertile soil, as sunlight warming his surface, as the protective canopy that shielded him from the harsh cold of infinite space. Geb pressed firmly into his role as the foundation of all terrestrial existence, found that his longing for Nut inspired him to reach upward in countless ways, to stretch toward her through every growing thing that would eventually spring from his fertile substance. His love for her would manifest in towering trees that seemed to stretch toward heaven, in mountain peaks that thrust upward as if trying to touch the sky, in the countless forms of life that would look up at her star-filled beauty and feel their hearts lift with wonder and longing. The space that Shu maintained between them became filled with possibility, with room for air to circulate and clouds to form, for birds to fly and seeds to drift on wind currents, for all the dynamic interactions between earth and sky that would characterize the living world. This space was not empty, but pregnant with potential, vibrating with the creative tension between Geb's solid stability and Nut's infinite expansiveness. In their separation, earth and sky discovered a new form of relationship, one based not on direct physical contact but on constant communication, on the endless exchange of gifts and energies that would keep them connected, while allowing room for new forms of consciousness to emerge and flourish in the space between them. Their love had evolved from the simple union of 2 individuals into the complex dance of relationship that would serve as the pattern for all future interactions between separate but connected beings. During the day, Nut would arch her blue body across the sky, holding the sun in her embrace and carrying it from east to west in its daily journey across the heavens, providing the light and warmth that would awaken life on Geb's surface and inspire it to reach upward toward her luminous presence. At night, she would swallow the sun and give birth to it again at dawn, her body studded with stars that served as windows through which the light of deeper mysteries could shine down upon the sleeping earth. Geb would respond to her daily gifts by opening his soil to receive the seeds that fell from her domain, by lifting his mountains and hills to catch the rain clouds she sent out, by creating valleys and plains where the waters flowing down from her heights could gather and pool and create the rivers and lakes that would serve as arteries and organs in the living body of the world. Their eternal dance of giving and receiving, of reaching toward each other while maintaining the separation that made their relationship possible, created the fundamental rhythm of existence that would govern all life on earth, day and night, season and season, the cycles of growth and rest, birth and death. All these patterns emerged from the loving tension between earth and sky, from their desire to be united coupled with their acceptance of the necessity of separation. Yet even as they established this new form of relationship, both Geb and Nut felt stirring within them the creative impulse that had driven the entire sequence of divine emergence from the beginning. Their love for each other, transformed by separation into a constant creative tension, began to generate new forms of consciousness, new expressions of divine nature that would carry the creative process forward into even more complex and sophisticated forms of existence and relationship. In the fertile darkness of Nut's star-filled womb, nourished by her love for Geb and his answering devotion to her, 4 new divine beings began to take shape, each destined to play a crucial role in the great drama of creation that was still unfolding from the original stirring of consciousness in the primordial waters of Nun. Within the cosmic womb of Nut, as she stretched her star-adorned body across the infinite reaches of space, 4 distinct consciousnesses began to coalesce and individuate, each drawing upon the combined essences of earth and sky while developing characteristics and destinies uniquely their own. These were not merely the children of Geb and Nut, but the next generation in the great chain of divine emergence, beings whose very existence would introduce entirely new possibilities into the expanding universe of consciousness and relationship. The first to stir toward individual awareness was Osiris, whose essence embodied the principles of order, justice, and the eternal continuity of life through death and rebirth. Even before his birth, his presence could be felt as a stabilizing influence throughout the divine realm, a force that would bring harmony and proper relationship to all the various elements and energies that had emerged from the original unity of Nun. His consciousness was like deep, still water that reflects the sky perfectly, like fertile soil that receives every seed with equal patience and nurtures each according to its nature. Osiris carried within his developing awareness an innate understanding of cycles, of the way that ending becomes beginning, death becomes birth, and apparent loss transforms into unexpected abundance. He would become the god who presided over the mysteries of renewal, who demonstrated through his own experience that consciousness cannot be truly destroyed, but only transformed from one state of being to another, each transformation bringing new possibilities for growth and relationship. Following closely in the sequence of divine emergence came Isis, whose nature was pure love expressing itself through wisdom, healing, and the fierce protection of all that is vulnerable and precious. Her consciousness was like moonlight on water, gentle but penetrating, soft but incredibly strong, capable of finding its way into every crack and crevice where healing was needed, every heart where comfort was required, every situation where love could work its quiet miracles of transformation. Isis possessed from the moment of her first awakening an intuitive knowledge of the hidden connections that bind all things together, the subtle threads of relationship and interdependence that create unity from apparent multiplicity. She would become the goddess who could speak the true names of things, who could call upon the secret powers that flow beneath the surface of ordinary reality, who could heal what seemed broken and restore what appeared to be lost beyond recovery. Set emerged next, and his consciousness was like wildfire, like the sudden storm that clears away what has become stagnant, like the desert wind that strips away everything non-essential to reveal the bare bones of truth. His nature embodied the principle of necessary destruction, the recognition that growth sometimes requires the clearing away of old forms that have outlived their usefulness, that renewal often demands the courage to let go of what is familiar and secure. Set would become the god of chaos and change, not as destructive forces to be feared, but as essential elements in the great dance of creation and transformation. Without his willingness to challenge existing structures, to question established patterns, to shake up comfortable arrangements that had begun to stagnate, the universe would gradually wind down into static perfection, beautiful but lifeless, harmonious but devoid of the creative tension that drives continued growth and evolution. Finally came Nephthys, whose essence was like twilight, like the liminal spaces between one state of being and another, like the threshold between the known and the unknown, where transformation becomes possible. Her consciousness was uniquely suited to navigate the borderlands of existence, to serve as guide and protector for those who must journey between different realms of being, to offer comfort and wisdom to those facing the great transitions that mark every authentic spiritual development. Nephthys would become the goddess of endings that are also beginnings, of the sacred spaces where death and birth touch each other, where the old self must be released in order for the new self to emerge. Her presence would offer reassurance to all who must walk through the valleys of uncertainty and change, reminding them that no transition, however difficult, is undertaken alone or without purpose. As these four divine consciousnesses continued to develop within the protective embrace of Nut's celestial body, they began to sense each other as presence and to establish the relationships that would define much of their future interaction. Osiris and Isis felt an immediate recognition and attraction, a sense of complementarity that suggested they were designed to work together in perfect harmony. His stability balancing her fluidity, her wisdom guiding his strength. Their combined essences creating something greater than either could achieve alone. Set and Nephthys also recognized each other as natural partners, though their relationship would be more complex and challenging than that of Osiris and Isis, where Osiris and Isis represented the harmony that emerges from the union of complementary opposites. Set and Nephthys embodied the creative tension that arises when seemingly contradictory forces must learn to work together, when destruction and preservation, chaos and guidance must find ways to serve the same ultimate purpose. Yet even as these partnerships began to form, more complex patterns of relationship and attraction were also emerging. Set felt a grudging admiration for the natural authority and dignity that Osiris possessed, an admiration that was complicated by a growing sense of rivalry and competition. If Osiris represented order and harmony, then Set would represent the questions that must be asked about any order, the challenges that must be posed to any harmony that might become complacent or exclusive.